They were married to childhood friends that died of cancer just weeks apart. Then they met at one of the funerals and realized they shared a common grief. They turned to each other for support and fell in love all over again. Their remarkable and heartwarming story is told in the new book called The Color of Rain. Please welcome Michael and Gina Spain. So good to have you guys here. Thank you. Gina, your husband knew he was sick, and he started making some videos for your kids.
He did, yeah.
I mean, he knew he was not going to make it, didn't he?
Well, that's true. He was diagnosed with cancer in 2002, and he formed an outline. He said, I'm going to think of all the things I would ever want to tell my boys if I'm not here. But the cancer journey was a 3-year journey, so he had a hard time pushing that record button for a while. But as he got near to the end of his life, he decided it's time to do this, and he did.
We want to show one of them. This is when he's telling his boys about faith. Listen.
If you pray for no other thing, pray that God will tell you what he wants you to do and that you'll hear his voice. And you'll be surprised that that will happen time and time again. You'll say, God, what do you want me to do about this thing at school? Do you want me to do this or that? And then you just listen, you're quiet, and the answer will come to you, and it will come to you from God. The trick is then, once you hear him, is to do what he tells you to do, because sometimes it's not going to be what you want.
Gina, when you watch these now, is it still tough for you to watch this?
Yeah, I got to tell you, every time I see it, it's just hearing his voice is what startles me more than anything. The visual, not as much, but hearing him and the things that he says and the way that he wants it. You know, it's so impossible to teach your children everything you ever wanted to teach them in a DVD set. It's parenting is not meant to be done that way, and here he is just trying to say all the things that he wants them to know about their faith, about respect, about how to live, about how to balance your work and your life, and how to respect women and all those things. And it was, you know, it's never enough, but it's been a wonderful gift to have those.
Your husband, Matt, passed away on Christmas Day.
Yes.
Tell me about that day.
It was interesting because he got up that morning. Now, granted, he was very fragile and frail and was on oxygen at this point, but he got out of bed and he went downstairs with our boys and he sat on the couch very quietly and watched them open their gifts and even called them over and said a prayer with them. And so he had this little time with them that day, and he went back upstairs and he laid down, and it wasn't until later that evening when everything kind of took a turn and I knew that this was going to be it.
We have a video from that Christmas. This is Matt on Christmas Day.
Dear Lord, we thank you very, very much for the gifts that you gave us this year. We ask that you be with us in the next year, that you teach us how to be even better boys and act even more like Jesus.
That was Christmas Day. And he died that day.
He did. He died about probably about 12 hours after that was taken.
You know, it's tough for me to watch that. I don't know how you do it. I mean, it's such a powerful story.
That was a little shocking, actually. I haven't seen that one in a while.
Michael, shortly after Matt passed away, then your wife, Kathy, was diagnosed with a brain tumor.
She was. You have to remember that Matt and Kathy knew each other from childhood. They grew up together.
You guys didn't know each other, but Matt and Kathy
Correct.
knew each other.
Yeah, we never met, and I didn't have the pleasure of meeting Matt either, but my wife Kathy grew up in a small town in Michigan and knew Matt, actually went to school with him from grade school all the way through college. And when he passed away on Christmas night, she, of course, attended his funeral, and it was only 3 weeks after the funeral that she developed a headache. And it got worse, and eventually we took her into the ER, not knowing what else to do about a headache. And it was there they diagnosed her with inoperable brain cancer. And we had intended to try clinical trials and whatever it was that could buy her more time. But God had different plans, and it was only 17 days later that she passed away.
Then the two of you met as a result of the memorial service.
Yeah. Kathy, you know, she was such an extraordinary woman, had such an extreme capacity for love and for faith. On her last day, as she and I were essentially saying goodbye to each other, we knew the end was near. Out of the blue, she said to me, "Call Gina Kell." And I tried to dismiss that and say, well, we're not talking about anything like that right now. And she grasped my hand just a little tighter, and she said, "Michael, call Gina Kell. She'll help you." Now, I know that she had none of this in mind, that we would ultimately be married and anything else. But Kathy was the kind of person who connecting people was important. She had such a heart for Gina, just living across town from us and with 2 boys about the same age as our children. She knew that being a stubborn man, that I would probably hunker down, try to isolate myself, and she was really, in her last hours, trying to connect us. So ultimately we did. Gina was kind enough to show up at Kathy's funeral, and she sat with me for a while, and I asked her about her children, of course, how they were doing. And at some point I looked at her and I said, you and I only just met, but I think you're the only one I know here tonight.
Wow. The interesting thing, while your wife Kathy was telling you to talk to Gina,
yes,
Matt was giving yet another video that I think sort of helps to understand how this story got together.
If Mom respected somebody and loved somebody enough to marry them after I've passed away, I want you to expect that I love and respect that guy too. I know your mom's values, and if she remarries, she's going to remarry somebody that I approve of. So I want you to respect that man like he was me.
More of this remarkable story when we return. Stay with us. We are back with Michael and Gina, the authors of the book, The Color of Rain. It's just a phenomenal story. When we left, it was a pretty sad moment.
Yeah.
You guys had just lost your spouses within days of each other. Now you meet. How does that meeting turn into a romance, Gina?
Well, it takes a little time, first of all. Obviously, I mean, when you meet under those conditions, the last thing on your mind is love, romance, because in fact, falling in love again is high-risk territory. You've just lost the love of your life. So the thought of having that kind of exposure to risk, to loss again, isn't even something you can think of. But over many, many months, we got to know each other. We spent a lot of time with our kids and our families together. We had very little time one-on-one. In fact, over the 2 years that we got to know each other, we had exactly 1 date.
Wow.
So it wasn't like we dated or anything, and so
but it was a great date.
It must have been. It must have been a great day. But it started as a friendship and sort of mutual support for the common grief that you had had, and then sparks flew, I guess, maybe over time.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Look, he's so cute. No, but I mean, yeah, it felt very natural and easy and comfortable, and we weren't trying to force anything. There was no need to have each other in our lives. I think a lot of people kind of have that misconception sometimes. Well, you're both widowed. Your kids need a mom and a dad, and it makes sense that way. But this wasn't out of need. I mean, it was genuinely out of love. And I had been loved so well in my marriage to Matt, as you can see by those videos.
Yeah.
I know Michael was too, and so having understood love that way made it very easy to know that this was the real thing.
Michael, how did your kids respond when you guys sort of went from just being friends and talking to saying, hey, we're going to get married?
Well, you have to take a half a step back, because just a few months after my wife died, our 3 children huddled around a piece of paper while I was butchering another dinner for them. And after dinner, they presented me with a contract that they had handwritten, and it said roughly, I, Daddy Spain, promise to never, ever, forever marry another woman. Or else you'll face screaming, crying, and worse. And I happily...
No pressure.
No, it was nice they put the consequences on there, though. But I happily signed it, because, as Gina said, in those moments, you're not thinking anything like that. Well, about 2 years later, as we had grown very close as families, and it was clear, really, what was coming, we sat down for a family meeting to essentially get our children's blessing and say, what would you guys think if we were to become married and make a family out of it? And my 3 kids, they were so excited and so happy, they ran to try and retrieve the contract. And I said, no, I want to keep that forever. And my daughter looked at me, and she was only 11 at the time, and she said, Dad, we have to tear it up, otherwise you have to go to jail. So that was a pretty good indication that they were on board.
I felt pretty good that they wanted to tear it up, too.
Yeah, you had to hope that they wanted to
thank
tear it
God,
up.
right?
Yeah, right. What's been the hardest part now of blending the family? I mean, you guys really are the real-life Brady bunch.
Well,
Yeah, there's no Alice.
there's no Alice.
There's no trips to Hawaii. I got news for you about that. But no, it's actually been pretty seamless. I think that we took our time and involved the kids in the process, and we weren't real affectionate with one another. We just became really good friends as a unit. There were 7 people falling in love. There weren't just 2, and we were very cognizant of that. We made it, we paid close attention to our children and their needs in the process, and the blending part was pretty easy.
There's also 2 things that have really helped us. First of all, our spouses are still very present tense. Matt and Kathy are still very much a part of this family. There's 9 people in this family. It's just the 2 of them have already been called home. And the other thing is our faith has provided an incredible foundation for us so that not only these incredible valleys that we've talked about, the sad parts of life, but also the joyful dancing parts of life are easier to understand for our kids because of their faith.
You know, it's a great story. The book is called A Color of Rain, and I want to say thanks to Michael and Gina for sharing this great story. And it's not just a sad story, though. There's a lot of sadness, but it's really the story of triumph, the story of how faith and how family are able to take the most horrible situations that you can imagine and make them okay. What a great story, The Color of Rain. Thank you again for being with us.
Thank you.
We'll be right back. Stay with us.